Okay, so after that really sharp, really painful drop, it feels like the entire crypto market is just holding its breath. We've seen some massive liquidations. Fear is definitely in the air, but, at the same time, you hear some whispers that the worst might already be behind us.
So that brings us to the one question on everyone's mind. Is this it? Have we finally hit the bottom? Or is this just a little pause before the next leg down? That's exactly what we're going to break down right now, looking at the key signals you need to be watching. All right, here's how we're going to tackle this. We'll start by checking Bitcoin's immediate short-term health. Then we're going to zoom way out to see the bigger picture. After that, we'll hunt for clues in the wider market, circle a really important date on the calendar, and then we'll wrap it all up with a simple framework to help you make sense of everything.
First things first, let's get our hands dirty and look at the short-term picture. What is the daily chart for Bitcoin telling us right this second? And honestly, the signals are, well, they're pretty conflicted.
So if you just glance at the short-term chart, the structure definitely looks weak. It feels like sellers are in control. Every time the price tries to pop up, a little green candle, it gets met with a lot of skepticism. The bulls really have their work cut out for them here. But this is where it gets really interesting, because you have this major conflict. On one hand, the moves up are happening on pretty low trading volume. That's a bearish sign. But on the other hand, we saw that gigantic, sharp drop followed by an immediate recovery. Traders have a name for that. They call it a capitulation wick, and it's a classic signal that all the panicked sellers have been totally flushed out, which very often can mark a temporary bottom.
So for the bulls to actually get back in the driver's seat, it's not going to be one big jump. Think of it more like a step-by-step battle. First, they've got to reclaim that $93,700 level. That's the first small sign of strength. Then comes the huge psychological fight for $100K. And only if they can push past that and hold above $106,000, that's when you can start to seriously talk about a trend reversal. Okay, so the daily chart looks pretty shaky, right? But in markets, perspective is everything. So what happens when we just ignore all that day-to-day noise and zoom way, way out to the much more powerful monthly chart? Now, before we even look at the chart, we have to get our heads around this one concept, the higher low. This is the absolute foundation of any healthy, long-term uptrend. It's basically a sign that even after a price dip, buyers are jumping in at a higher price than they did last time, which keeps the whole upward momentum going. And boom, here it is, the long-term battlefield in action. See, despite all the short-term fear, the big-picture bullish structure is technically still intact. The crucial test right now is whether this current dip holds as that higher low we just talked about. If the price closes the month below $82,200, that's a serious red flag. But if the buyers step in and push the price back above $102,400, whoa, that would be an incredible show of strength. So, the long-term Bitcoin chart gives us one huge piece of the puzzle. But Bitcoin doesn't exist in a vacuum. To get the complete story, we need to broaden our view and see what's happening everywhere else, in the rest of crypto and even in the wider economy. Now, this is the total value of every single crypto asset all added together. And look where it's sitting. It's retesting the absolute peak of the 2021 bull market. This level is a historic line in the sand. If the market can hold this as support, that would be a massive statement for the entire asset class.
Okay, now let's look at who's actually selling. I mean, the headlines have been screaming about outflows from the new Bitcoin ETFs, right? But the reality is, those outflows only make up about 8% of the total assets held in those funds. That tells us the vast majority of long-term ETF investors are just holding on tight right through this volatility.
That conviction from the Bitcoin crowd is one thing, for sure. But it's what's happening just beneath the surface with the altcoins that tells a really surprising story about the market's real appetite for risk right now. I mean, just look at these numbers. While Bitcoin was taking a hit, over $620 million flooded into new ETFs for Solana and XRP. And this was in just a few days. This isn't a small trickle, folks. This is a tidal wave of fresh capital, and it shows a huge demand for crypto that goes way beyond just Bitcoin.
And if that wasn't enough, there's this huge macro force just lurking in the background. The U.S. Treasury has been stockpiling cash, building up its general account by over $700 billion. Now, that money is about to be spent and injected back into the economy. And historically, that kind of liquidity has been absolute rocket fuel for risk assets like crypto.
So you have this macro force, you've got the chart structures, the ETF flows we've been looking at, and they are all pointing towards one single critical date. This is a day that could seriously define the market's direction for the next few months.
So yeah, get out your calendar and put a big circle around December 10th, because on this one day, we are getting a perfect storm of market-moving economic data that is almost guaranteed to trigger some major fireworks across every market.
So get this. On the exact same day that the Federal Reserve makes its interest rate decision, we are also getting a super rare double release of inflation data for both October and November. The market is going to be reacting to the Fed's future plans and 2 months of inflation data all at the same time. You're going to want to fasten your seatbelt for that one.
Okay, I know that was a lot of information. We've hit short-term charts, long-term charts, market flows, macro data. So now, let's pull it all together into a simple, clear framework so you can cut through the noise and watch this story unfold for yourself.
And look, here's the honest truth. Anyone who tells you they know for sure what's going to happen next is selling you something. The short-term structure is weak, period. But we have identified the very specific conditions that could signal the beginning of a real recovery. Our job isn't to predict, it's to watch and react to the evidence.
So, here is your cheat sheet. These are the 4 big things to focus on. Number 1, the Bitcoin monthly close. Does it hold that crucial higher low above 82,200? 2, those key Bitcoin levels. Can the bulls start their step-by-step climb back up? 3, December 10th. How does the market react? And finally, number 4, watch the money flows. Do the Bitcoin ETF inflows start up again? And does that treasury cash start hitting the market? These are the clues that will tell the story.
And that really is the bottom line. What we're watching right now is a battle. On one side, you've got short-term fear and a very shaky chart. And on the other side, you've got the conviction of long-term holders and a fire hose of new money just waiting in the wings. Which one is going to win? Well, that checklist we just went through is going to give us the answer.